April 18th, 1991.
You've seen the videotape, but what really happened that night in Los Angeles? For the first time, police officers talk. Officers who were there when Rodney King was pulled over and brutally beaten.
It got to the point that the only thing the officers could do was use the batons to try to get him down on the ground.
Judd Rose revisits that night in March with eyewitnesses. One was in the car.
I was worried and I was scared for my life.
Prime time from New York. Here now, Diane Sawyer.
Good evening. It's been 6 weeks now since all of us first saw that home videotape of Los Angeles police beating Rodney King. Tonight, Judd Rose is going to take us all back to the scene to fill in pieces of the puzzle not visible on the tape. For the first time, you're going to hear the version of events given by police officers who were there. Some police say the videotape is like that famous Rorschach test, the one where people see completely different images depending on their point of view. And there are certain moments in the drama that unfolded that night that are key to your point of view. Why didn't Rodney King stop his car when police first tried to pull him over? Was he under the influence of drugs? Did he resist arrest? Here is Judd Rose's investigation of what really happened that night in L.A.
In a city built on illusions, nothing that night was quite what it seemed. Heroes turned into villains. The truth became a lie. Shadows fell across the land of sunlight. It was after midnight, Sunday, March 3rd, and Freddie Helms was out for a drive with his friends Bryant Allen and Rodney King.
Yeah, we was talking, listening to music, riding, you know. And Rodney said he wants to take us to a place where his father used to take him.
Rodney steered his white Hyundai west onto the freeway. It was just about 12:40 a.m. TJ and Melanie Singer, a husband and wife highway patrol team, were here on the Foothill Freeway heading west. Melanie was driving. She would later tell a grand jury that she looked in her rearview mirror and saw a white compact approaching fast. Singer claims that she let the compact pull ahead of her so she could keep pace and see how fast it was going. She says that she gunned her patrol car to its top speed, 115 miles an hour, and the white car was still pulling ahead. She says she then flipped on her siren and her red lights, and her husband radioed in the license number.
We're only southbound on Paxton at Foothill.
How fast was King going? Well, not as fast as the CHP officers claimed. In fact, the Highway Patrol's own tests showed a car like King's, a Hyundai, can't go faster than 97 miles an hour. But more curious than how fast he was fleeing is why he was fleeing in the first place. Stephen Lerman is Rodney King's lawyer.
Well, he may have acted unwisely and he may have acted immaturely by not stopping right away for whatever reason he had.
Well, what has he told you?
He said that when he saw the cops in back of him, he was afraid they would give him a ticket, and he wanted to get off the freeway.
He's afraid they'll give him a ticket, so he keeps fleeing?
He was afraid that somehow it would interfere with his parole.
King was on parole after doing time for robbing a grocery store in 1989. Now, suddenly, he was a wanted man again, although at this point, only for speeding. The patrol car chased the Hyundai for nearly 3 miles of freeway, at times separated by as little as 100 feet.
Appears to be 3 male blacks in the vehicle. It's a white Hyundai, I believe.
In the middle of all this, Freddie Helms was in the back seat of the Hyundai, he claims, sound asleep.
You were asleep during the whole pursuit.
Yes.
I've got to tell you that some people might find that a little amazing. How could you have been asleep when, supposedly, that car was going in a high-speed chase being pursued by the police? How could you have slept through that?
I don't know. I slept through it. I'm a hard sleeper myself, you know. I sleep through earthquakes.
Now the chase moved from the freeway to the darkened streets of Lakeview Terrace, with patrol cars from the LAPD and the school district police joining in. But if King was worried, he wasn't showing it.
One point, Mr. King actually came up and stopped for a red light, and he stopped at sometimes, drove through red lights at other times, stopped at green lights, and then drove through the intersection.
According to the Highway Patrol, at 12:51 a.m., just about 11 minutes after King's car was first spotted, he suddenly slammed on the brakes. The chase was over, but police cars, even a police helicopter, were converging from all over.
Police officers, knowing that there's a so-called pursuit in progress, intend to be at the termination of the pursuit for the ass kicking that follows. And that's what happened, pure and simple. There's a gang mentality, the adrenaline's pumping, and no matter what Rodney King did when he got out of the car, he was doomed.
But what King did when he got out of the car had a direct bearing on what happened next. Or that's what you'd believe if you read the arrest report filed later that night. Primetime has obtained a copy of that report, written by one of the LA cops now under indictment. In it, he claims that King ignored repeated orders to get out of his car, and that when he did get out of his car, he ended up getting right back in it, and then finally got back out again. Of course, that's just the police version.
And this is Freddie Helms' version.
All I seen was him get out the car. Then they told us to get out the car.
He got out of the car right away?
Yes, he did.
Without delay?
Without delay.
That's important because the police would try to justify their use of force by claiming King was resisting arrest. Most eyewitnesses say King did not appear to resist. Others aren't sure what they saw. Dawn Davis watched from her apartment across the street.
He wasn't really going anywhere. He was standing talking to the officer, and then it looked like just those two were struggling. I didn't see blows going fist by fist, but they were close together and they were in a close struggle. The next thing I know, I guess about 5 or 6 of them came up to him and they took him to the ground.
None of the police there that night has spoken on TV about what happened until now. 2 of the officers agreed to talk to Primetime on the condition that their identities be concealed.
King was acting very irrational. He wouldn't obey any officer's commands to get on the ground, to lay down. Several officers ordered him down, get down. He wouldn't. He acted like he was on something. 2 officers tried at that time to take him into custody. And they were literally thrown off like rag dolls by Mr. King. A lot of people, I formed in the back of my mind that this gentleman was on the influence of probably a very strong drug. More than likely PCP.
In fact, it says right in the arrest report that PCP was believed to be the cause of King's alleged behavior. Tests done later showed King had been drinking, but there was no evidence he'd used PCP that night or ever. Still, his behavior was puzzling, as when the cops tried to subdue him with an electric stun gun, the taser.
He was tasered once, had little to no effect on him. The second time he was tasered, and this was done by the sergeant, he gave out a scream. This scream that I heard was not really in pain, it was more of anger. He did go down, I believe, to maybe 1 or 2 knees, and within a second, he was back up again.
Bear in mind that each shot from the taser hits its target with 2 tiny darts that send a 50,000-volt jolt. Nurses examining King later testified that none of the darts had pierced his flesh, although taser experts say it should have worked anyway.
The attempts to characterize Rodney King as acting foolish or that he was under the influence are all red herrings. They're all essentially side issues. The real issue here is that these cops use excessive force and almost kill this guy. And that's the only issue. The only issue.
It was now 12:53. At the complex across the street, people were coming out of their apartments. George Holliday brought his new handy cam.
I was concentrated on the camera, trying to make sure it was focused. I could hear the people below me down here on the sidewalk and the other balconies down the building here yelling, "Stop, stop," and "Oh my God," that type of thing. And I figured if all these other people didn't get the police to do anything, maybe one more voice wouldn't do too much. So I kept on filming.
The result, one of the most famous and revolting home movies ever made. As it begins, King is on the ground. The dangling wire is from the taser. Holding the other end is Sergeant Stacy Kuhn, a 15-year veteran of the LAPD, the officer in charge. Over there, 7-year veteran Ted Brasino. He claims here he tried to stop the beating, but later he's seen joining in. And that's Officer Lawrence Powell, a 3-year veteran, and rookie Timothy Wynn. They wrote in their arrest report that they used their batons in self-defense.
Rodney was told to put his hands behind his back so he could be handcuffed. Rodney did not do as the officer said and used the baton in an attempt to get him to comply to the orders so that they could come up and put his arm behind his back so they could cuff him safely.
But witnesses tell a different tale. On the tape, this car is seen driving away after its passengers got a close-up look at the beating. One of them was this man, who asked us not to identify him.
It's trying to go like this, but then he would get hit, so he would go back, you know, to like protect himself. But when they would ask him, I guess, to put his hands back again, he would try again, but they would hit him again, and he was getting hit like from different places. And then one guy was telling him, maybe put your hands back, but the other one was hitting him, so there was no way he could put his hands back.
Also visible at the very end of the notorious tape is this bus, which was held up by the police activity. On the bus, members of a Mexican band returning from a performance. These musicians had the closest and clearest view of the beating, but until now, they hadn't spoken publicly of what they saw.
He don't do nothing to, I mean, he tried to fight or something like this. I don't see nothing like that.
They trying to kill him because the way they were hit him, I thought they was trying to kill him.
And he's not the only one who thinks that. Jim Mahone spent years training L.A. sheriff's deputies in the use of the baton. He says he knew the cops who beat King intended serious harm when he saw that they were using a two-handed grip.
When you put two hands on it as if you're using a baseball bat and wind up and really force yourself coming in, you're generating much more power, probably enough power that, you know, you hit a person in a vital area, probably would take his life, and that's the method that I saw them using.
King was indeed hit in a vital area, the head, causing multiple fractures and other serious injuries, including, his lawyer claims, possible brain damage. Candace Barnes is King's aunt.
He says that it was like he was a wounded dog and that he was broken up so badly, and all he wanted to do was for them to let him go, just let him go, and he would make it home. And his wife goes, "But you were so badly beaten, would you have made it?" And he says, "Yes, I would have made it home even if I would have died on the doorstep."
Finally, mercifully, at about 1 o'clock, the beating of Rodney King ended. At about 1:30, King was brought here to nearby Pacifica Hospital and taken in handcuffs to an emergency room surrounded by a half-dozen police officers. The two nurses that treated him spoke later to the grand jury. And according to their testimony, at one point, King was making small talk with them about baseball when a cop said to him, "We had a pretty good hard game ourselves tonight, didn't we? We hit quite a few home runs. Do you know who we were playing tonight, Rodney?" "Yeah," said King. "Me." "Well, you lost the ball game, didn't you?" said the cop. "We won it." In fact, one nurse told Primetime that the officers were openly bragging about how many times they'd hit King. These photos, taken a few days later and seen here for the first time, show the results of that game of hardball. Next month, the 4 L.A. police officers indicted for the beating will go on trial. As for Rodney King himself, he's undergoing therapy, avoiding reporters, and confronting his demons.
He has nightmares all the time, and he'll wake up in the middle of the night, 2:30, 3 o'clock, and, you know, actually screaming, "Don't beat me anymore, don't beat me anymore. You know, just let me go, I'll go."
The California Highway Patrol conducted its own investigation into the beating, and although the findings have not yet been made public, Primetime has learned that the probe concluded that Rodney King did not fight with the police. As Judd said, King is still recuperating, and on his doctor's advice, he's resting and staying out of the public eye.